For 40 long years my life revolved around one person. My son. When I say I gave him everything, I don't mean in the casual way people toss that phrase around. I mean every ounce of energy, every hard-earned dollar, every dream I ever had for myself was laid down like bricks to build the foundation of his future. I was only 19 when I had him. His father left before his first birthday, leaving me to raise a child on my own when I barely knew how to take care of myself. People whispered behind my back, shaking their heads, calling me foolish. But I didn't care. I looked down at his tiny face and I swore that I would be both mother and father, protector and provider, even if it meant breaking my back to do it. And break my back I did. I worked long shifts at a factory by day and cleaned houses by night. There were nights when my hands were so raw and blistered that I could barely hold a fork to feed myself, but somehow, I always managed to put food on his plate. He never went hungry even if I sometimes did. I remember one winter when the gas company threatened to shut off our heat. It was below freezing outside, snow piling up against our front door, and I only had enough money to either pay the bill or buy him a proper coat. I chose the coat. That night, I tucked him in, shivering under layers of blankets, while I sat up in the cold with a candle, rocking back and forth, praying I hadn't made a mistake. He never knew. He never saw me cry. To him, childhood was warmth, security, and a mother who never faltered. As he grew, so did my sacrifices. Every time a school trip came up, I found a way to pay. When he needed new shoes, I bought them even if it meant patching up my old ones with tape. I turned down dates, turned down opportunities, turned down the chance to live for myself. Because every moment, every choice was about him. And oh, how proud I was of him. He was smart, confident, charming. Teachers adored him, coaches praised him, neighbors smiled when he walked by. He had the kind of presence that drew people in, and I thought, yes, this is my reward. This is why I've sacrificed everything. So he can shine. I told myself over and over that all the years of loneliness would be worth it when he grew into a man who understood love and loyalty. I believed that one day when my hair turned gray and my hands trembled with age, he would be there, my son, my pride, my reason for living, to hold me up the way I had held him all these years. But life has a cruel way of shattering illusions. The truth, which I would learn far too late, is that sometimes the more you give, the less they value it. Sometimes love, when poured out without limits, becomes invisible, taken for granted, expected, even resented. And I didn't see it then. Not in those years when I stayed up late sewing patches onto his jeans so he wouldn't be embarrassed at school. Not in those mornings when I skipped breakfast so he could have extra milk in his cereal. Not in those nights when I sat in the dark counting coins, whispering promises to myself that I would never let him feel poor even if I did. Oh, I didn't see it. I thought love was enough. I thought sacrifice guaranteed loyalty. I thought a son raised on devotion would never turn his back on the woman who gave him everything. I was wrong. At the time, though, I couldn't have imagined it. I was too busy pouring everything I had into him, blind to the warning signs, blind to the truth that would one day come crashing down on me like a storm I never saw coming. And so, for 40 years I carried him on my shoulders. 40 years of sacrifice. 40 years of love. 40 years of believing I was building a future for us both. But as I would learn, painfully and brutally, I was building a future for him alone. And when he no longer needed me, he would prove just how disposable I was. For most of his childhood, my son was my shadow. He clung to me, laughed with me, trusted me. When he scraped his knees, he ran to me. When he aced his test, he shouted my name first. Every milestone in his life, big or small, I was there cheering him on. I thought that bond was unbreakable. But bonds aren't always broken in a single snap. Sometimes they erode, slowly, quietly, until one day you realize the rope you thought could hold a mountain has turned into a fraying thread. It began when he reached adulthood. At first it was small things. A tone in his voice when I reminded him to call me if he'd be late. A flash of irritation when I asked if he was eating enough. I brushed it off. He was becoming a man, carving out independence, testing boundaries. Every child does that. I told myself not to take it personally. But as the years went on, those small things grew sharper. Phone calls became fewer. Conversations became shorter. His words, once sweet and filled with affection, began to carry an edge, like every question I asked was an interrogation. "Stop nagging, Mom," he'd say with a roll of his eyes, even when all I'd asked was if he needed help with laundry. Then came her. The woman who would change everything. When he introduced me to the woman who would become his wife, I welcomed her with open arms. I had always dreamed of a daughter-in-law who would treat me like family, someone I could love like my own. I cooked for her, bought her little gifts, tried to make her feel at home. At first she was polite, sweet even. But there was something in her eyes, a coldness I couldn't place. She smiled with her lips but never with her heart. Over time, I noticed how she would glance at my son whenever I spoke, as though silently judging him for giving me attention. And little by little he began to change in her presence. It started with silence. When I spoke he no longer lit up. When I laughed he no longer laughed with me. He began siding with her in the smallest disagreements. About dinner, about holidays, about how I folded laundry. None of it mattered on its own, but together, it was like 1,000 little cuts slicing through the bond we once shared. Soon the distance wasn't just emotional. It was physical. He stopped visiting me as often, always too busy. When I asked if I could come over, he hesitated, glancing at her first. Her smile was tight, her excuses rehearsed. Maybe another day, Mom, we've got plans. Weeks stretched into months. And when I did visit, I felt like an outsider in the very home I had helped them buy with the savings I had lent him. One evening, I overheard her whispering when she thought I wasn't near. She's too much. Always around, always meddling. You need to set boundaries or we'll never have peace. Set boundaries. That was the first time I realized she didn't see me as family. He saw me as a burden. An inconvenience. A shadow she wanted erased from their perfect picture of a life together. And the worst part? My son listened. He began repeating her words back to me as if they were his own thoughts. Mom, you come over too much. Mom, you need to give us space. Mom, you can't just insert yourself into everything. Each time his voice was a little colder. Each time my heart sank a little deeper. I tried to ignore it. I told myself he was just caught between two loves, his wife and his mother. I told myself he would find a balance. But with every passing day the balance tipped further away from me. Then came the holidays. For 40 years, no matter how poor we were, I had always made sure holidays were magical for him. I would cook for days, decorate the house, and make him feel like the center of the world. But that year he called me just 2 days before Christmas. His voice was curt, rehearsed. Mom, we're spending Christmas with her family this year. Don't make a big deal out of it. I sat there, clutching the phone, staring at the wall. The house was already decorated. The turkey was thawing in the fridge. Gifts wrapped under the tree. And suddenly, it hit me, I was no longer part of his world the way I once was. It was a hollow, gnawing pain, like standing outside a window in the freezing cold, watching your own child laugh inside a warm house you're not allowed to enter. That was the moment I knew. The son I had raised with love, the boy who once promised he would never leave me, was slipping away. And worse, he wasn't slipping by accident. He was being pulled. Pulled away by a woman who saw me not as the mother who gave him life, but as competition. Pulled away by whispers that painted me as needy, controlling, unnecessary. Pulled away until one day he would do the unthinkable. But I wasn't ready to see it then. Not yet. Because even as the distance grew, I held on to hope. Hope that love would be stronger than influence. Hope that 40 years of sacrifice meant something. Hope that my son, my only son, would never betray me. But hope can be cruel. And soon it would betray me as surely as he did. It happened on a Sunday. Funny, isn't it? How the worst days of your life can begin so quietly, so ordinarily, that you don't see the storm until it's already ripping your world apart. I had gone to his house, carrying a basket of food I'd spent the morning cooking. Roasted chicken, vegetables, fresh bread, even his favorite dessert. Rice pudding, the kind I'd made for him since he was a boy. I thought we'd share a meal, laugh a little, remind each other of what family meant. I told myself the distance between us was just a phase, that maybe with a warm dinner and some kindness, things could begin to heal. But when I knocked on the door, it wasn't kindness that greeted me. It was his wife. She opened the door, her arms crossed, eyes sharp as knives. "You didn't call first," she said flatly. No hello. No warmth. Just a wall of coldness that made me hesitate on the doorstep like a stranger. "I thought I'd surprise you," I said softly, lifting the basket as though the food might soften her glare. "I cooked for us." Her lips curled into a smile that wasn't a smile at all. "We don't need it." And then he appeared. My son. My boy. Except he wasn't mine anymore. He stood behind her, expressionless, like a soldier waiting for orders. My heart leapt, expecting him to brush her off, to reach for me to say, "Come in, Mom." But instead he glanced at the basket, then at me, and shook his head. "Mom," he began, his voice clipped, rehearsed, "we need to talk." Something in my chest cracked. Those words, "we need to talk," are never followed by anything good. I stepped inside, clutching the basket like a shield. We sat in the living room, but I might as well have been in a courtroom. He didn't sit beside me. He sat across, his wife at his side, their hands joined like a united front. I was the intruder, the accused, waiting for the sentence. And then he said it. Words I never thought I'd hear from the boy I carried, the man I raised, the only family I had. "Mom, you can't live here anymore. It's time you moved out." I blinked, stunned. "What?" The word barely escaped my lips. He cleared his throat, avoiding my eyes. "We've talked about it, and it's too much. You're always around, always involved in things that don't concern you. We need our space." His wife nodded firmly, squeezing his hand like she'd scripted the whole thing. "It's not healthy for a marriage when a parent is always interfering," she added, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I don't interfere," I whispered, my voice trembling. I just love you. I just want to help." But he didn't hear me. Or maybe he did, and it no longer mattered. His face was set hard. Cold in a way that sent chills crawling down my spine. "You've done enough," he said flatly. "It's time for you to go live your own life. We'll take care of ourselves. Go live my own life." As though I hadn't already given every piece of my life to him. As though my life wasn't built entirely around his. Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to let them fall in front of her. Not in front of the woman who looked at me like I was nothing. I turned to my son, desperate, searching for the boy I once knew, the boy who used to curl up beside me when he had nightmares, the boy who once promised, "I'll always take care of you, Mom." But he was gone. All I saw was a man I no longer recognized. "Fine," I whispered. My voice cracked, breaking in two. "If that's what you want." I stood, clutching the basket to my chest like a lifeline. My legs felt like they might collapse beneath me, but I forced myself to walk out the door with my head held high. Behind me, the door shut with a final, echoing thud. A sound that felt like a coffin closing. Outside, the air was cold, biting against my skin. I stood on the porch, staring at the house I had helped him build. The house I had sacrificed for, the house I had believed was as much mine as his. And now I was nothing. No home. No family. No son. The basket slipped from my hands. The food spilled across the ground, my rice pudding splattering like wasted years on the concrete. That was the night my heart broke in a way it had never broken before. Not when his father left. Not during the long nights of struggle and loneliness. This was different. This was worse. Because this time it wasn't the world against me. It was my own son. And nothing in this world cuts deeper than betrayal from the one you gave everything to. The first night after he threw me out felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. I sat alone in the small drafty room a friend had lent me, staring at the four bare walls as if they were closing in. The silence was heavy, suffocating. After 40 years of giving everything to my son, I was alone, discarded like an old coat no one wanted anymore. I didn't sleep. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face. The way he wouldn't meet my eyes. The coldness in his voice. The echo of that door slamming shut behind me. It replayed again and again, stabbing me deeper each time. I kept asking myself, what did I do wrong? Was I too involved? Too protective? Too much? But then another voice inside whispered, no. You loved him. You sacrificed. You gave him everything. And that was the cruelest truth of all. Because love, pure, unconditional love, was what had led me here. The food basket I had carried spilled across the pavement haunted me like a symbol. My rice pudding, the dessert he used to beg for as a child, splattered and ruined on the cold ground. It was almost poetic. A lifetime of sacrifices, of small acts of love, wasted in one cruel moment. For days I moved like a ghost. I ate little. I spoke less. My body was present, but my spirit was broken. My heart felt like it had been carved out of my chest, and the ache spread through every bone. People who cared for me tried to console me, telling me he'd come around, that he didn't mean it, that maybe things would change. But I knew better. I had seen it in his eyes, that chilling certainty. He didn't want me anymore. The pain was unbearable. And yet, beneath the pain, something else began to stir. First it was small. A flicker. A spark. A whisper in the dark. You don't deserve this. You are not weak. You are not disposable. That whisper grew louder with each passing night. One evening I sat at the edge of my borrowed bed, staring at my reflection in the cracked mirror on the wall. The woman staring back at me looked tired, old, worn down. But behind the hollow eyes I saw something else: steel. For 40 years I had defined myself by being his mother. Every decision I made, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, it was all for him. But what had it given me? A broken heart and a locked door slammed in my face. And suddenly I realized something terrifying and liberating. If my son could throw me away so easily, then maybe, just maybe, it was time I stopped living only for him. It was a bitter truth to swallow, but it planted something in me I hadn't felt in years: resolve. I thought back to all the nights I had worked double shifts. All the money I had carefully saved, tucked away in hidden accounts. All the investments I had made quietly, wisely, without ever telling him. He thought I was poor. He thought I was weak. He thought I had nothing without him. But he was wrong. So very wrong. And as that thought rooted itself deeper, I felt a strange calm settle over me. My heartbreak didn't vanish, but it hardened. It stopped being an open wound and began turning into something else: armor. That night, for the first time since he betrayed me, I slept. And when I woke the next morning, I no longer felt like a ghost. I felt like a woman who had been pushed to the edge, and was now ready to climb back stronger. He had taken everything I had given him for granted. He had cast me aside, thinking I had nowhere to go, nothing to offer, no strength of my own. But he had underestimated me. And soon, very soon, he would realize the terrible mistake he had made. Because I was not done. Not by a long shot. My son thought he knew everything about me. He thought I was weak, helpless, dependent on him. But what he didn't know, what he never cared to notice, was that while I spent decades putting food on the table, I also learned how to build a future in silence. It began in the small ways. Every time I received my paycheck, I tucked away a little bit, even if it was just a few coins. I called it my just-in-case fund. At first, it was meant for emergencies: a broken washing machine, medical bills, the things life throws at you when you least expect it. But over time I grew wiser. When other women bought new clothes or jewelry, I kept wearing the same coat, the same shoes, until they nearly fell apart. When coworkers treated themselves to dinners, I went home and cooked lentils and rice. People thought I was simply frugal. What they didn't know was that I was saving. Always saving. And then I learned how to invest. A kind neighbor, a retired banker, once told me, "Don't let your money sleep, dear. Make it work for you." I took his advice to heart. I opened small accounts, invested carefully, avoided risks, but never missed opportunities. Year by year, quietly, steadily, my little savings grew. By the time my son was a man, I had built something solid. Real estate. Bonds. A steady stream of income that he never even suspected. Why didn't I tell him? Because I wanted him to grow on his own. I wanted him to earn his life, not wait around for mine to hand it over. He thought he was my provider. He thought without him I would crumble. And I let him believe it. Perhaps that was my mistake, letting him think he held all the power. But now, that mistake was about to become my greatest weapon. Sitting in that small borrowed room, I opened the old wooden box where I kept my most important documents. Bank statements, property deeds, investment records. My true safety net. I traced my fingers over the papers, feeling a strange mix of pride and anger. For years I had imagined leaving it all to him someday. My son. My only son. The boy I had raised with love and sacrifice. But now, staring at the cold evidence of his betrayal, I realized he didn't deserve it. He didn't deserve even a fraction of it. In that moment, something inside me hardened. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't discarded. I wasn't the helpless old woman his wife painted me to be. I had choices. And for the first time in decades, those choices were mine alone. I began making quiet moves. I called my lawyer, an old friend I trusted, and updated my will. I shifted accounts, locked down assets, secured everything in my name alone. If my son thought he could cast me aside and still inherit the fruits of my sacrifice, he was sorely mistaken. I also found myself standing outside a small cottage 2 days later. It was one of the properties I owned but had left rented for years. Now vacant, it stood waiting, sturdy, warm, mine. My new home. My sanctuary. Stepping inside, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Peace. The smell of wood, the sunlight streaming through the windows, the simple quiet. It was freedom. My freedom. I unpacked slowly, deliberately, savoring every moment. Each plate stacked in the cupboard, each curtain drawn across a window, was a declaration. I am not finished. I am not broken. I am still here. But more than peace, I felt something sharper burning beneath my calm. Resolve. My son thought he had won. He thought by shutting me out he had buried me in loneliness and despair. But he had no idea what was coming. He had no idea that the mother he thought powerless had built her own empire in the shadows. And soon, when his world began to collapse, as all selfish worlds eventually do, he would come to me. He would knock on my door, not with arrogance but with desperation. And when that day came, I would be ready. For now I waited. Quiet. Patient. Watching. Because sometimes, the sweetest revenge is not striking first. It is letting them fall and making sure you are the one standing when they hit the ground. The weeks that followed were like watching two different worlds unfold. His crumbling, mine rising. At first I only heard whispers. A neighbor mentioned that my son had been arguing loudly with his wife. Another told me his job was in trouble, that he had been passed over for a promotion he was certain was his. I didn't ask questions, but the news traveled fast. That's the thing about a small community. Nothing stays hidden for long. Meanwhile, in my little cottage, I was building a new life. Every morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and birdsong instead of arguments. I cooked in my own kitchen, tended to the small garden out back, and even joined a local book club. For the first time in decades, I wasn't living for anyone else. I was living for me. And it felt liberating. I thought I might feel lonely without him, but instead I discovered something I had almost forgotten. Peace. There was no tension, no cold stares, no feeling of being unwanted. Just quiet and the freedom to breathe. But while I was thriving, my son was unraveling. His wife, the one who had pushed me out, began showing her true colors. Without me to quietly cover their mistakes, smooth over their fights, or even help with finances when things were tight, the cracks in their marriage widened. She wanted more money, more attention, more status, and he, weighed down by stress and arrogance, couldn't deliver. I heard from a friend that she had stormed out of their home one evening, shouting that she didn't sign up for this. Another said they saw her having dinner with someone else. Whether it was true or not, I didn't care. All I knew was that the perfect picture they had painted when they pushed me out was crumbling before their very eyes. And then came the financial troubles. My son had always lived beyond his means. Fancy cars, expensive gadgets, dinners at restaurants I could never afford when he was growing up. He believed he was invincible, that money would always flow his way. But arrogance doesn't pay the bills. Without my quiet help, the little loans I used to give, the groceries I used to bring, reality hit him hard. He fell behind on payments. Creditors started calling. The proud man who once told me I was a burden was suddenly drowning in burdens of his own. And the irony? He didn't even know that while he struggled, I was flourishing. I had rented out another property, doubling my income. I furnished my cottage beautifully, hosted dinners with new friends, and began to laugh again, real, joyful laughter that I hadn't felt in years. People who barely knew me began to admire me, not as someone's mother, but as a strong, independent woman in her own right. Every night as I sat by the fireplace, sipping tea and reading, I thought of him. Not with bitterness, not anymore. Instead, with a strange calm. I didn't need to chase him, didn't need to force him to see my worth. Life was doing the work for me. Because while he had pushed me out, thinking I was powerless, the truth was simple. He needed me more than I ever needed him. And soon he would realize it. The day was coming when he would stand where I once stood, on the outside, desperate, alone. The day was coming when he would finally understand the pain of being discarded. I didn't rush it. I didn't wish for it. I simply lived, strong and steady, knowing that fate has a way of circling back. And sure enough, just 3 days after my son had cast me aside, I heard a knock at my door. Not a polite knock. Not the kind you give when visiting casually. It was heavy, desperate, almost frantic. I set down my teacup, my heart thudding in my chest. I walked to the door, my hands steady, my breath calm. And when I opened it, there he was, my son. Tears streaked his face. His shoulders shook. His eyes, once cold and dismissive, now brimmed with desperation. "Mom," he choked out, his voice breaking. "Please. I need you." And in that moment, standing tall in the doorway of my own home, I realized the tables had finally, completely turned. When I opened the door that evening, I almost didn't recognize him. My son, the same man who had once stood tall, proud, and unyielding, now looked smaller, diminished. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, his hands trembling at his sides. Gone was the arrogance, the confidence, the sense of superiority that had pushed me out. In its place was something raw and unfamiliar. Desperation. "Mom." His voice cracked, the word breaking apart in his throat. "Please." I didn't know where else to go. For a long moment I just looked at him. I said nothing. The silence between us was heavy, thick with all the words he had spoken to me before. All the cruelty, all the coldness, all the ways he had dismissed me. That silence seemed to choke him more than any accusation could. Finally I stepped aside. "Come in." He stumbled past me, collapsing onto the sofa as though his legs could no longer hold him. He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with sobs. My son, my proud, untouchable son, was weeping like a child. I stood a few steps away, arms crossed, watching him. Part of me ached to comfort him, to reach out like I used to when he was small, to wipe away his tears. But another part of me, the part that had been broken and discarded, held me firmly in place. "What happened?" I asked, my tone steady, calm. He lifted his head, eyes red and swollen. "She left me, Mom. She took everything. The car, the money, even the savings account." His voice broke again. "I don't know what to do. I don't have anyone else. I don't have anything." His words hung in the air, heavy with irony. He didn't have anyone else. Not after pushing me away. Not after treating me as though I were disposable. Not after locking me out of the very home I had helped him build. "I thought you didn't need me," I said quietly. His face crumpled. "I was wrong. God, Mom, I was so wrong." He leaned forward, clutching at my hands, his tears dripping onto my skin. "Please, forgive me. Please help me. I can't do this without you." I looked down at his hands clutching mine, the same hands that had once pushed me out of his life. And for the first time in my life I realized the power I held. For 40 years he had been the center of my world. I had poured myself into him, believing I was nothing without him. But now here he was, broken, lost, begging at my door. And I was standing strong, whole, and steady. It was almost poetic. I pulled my hands free, slowly, deliberately. He flinched as though I had slapped him. "Do you know what it felt like?" I said softly. "To be told I wasn't wanted? To be thrown out of the house I sacrificed everything for? To stand on that porch with nowhere to go, my heart in pieces." His lips trembled. I wasn't thinking. She convinced me. I held up my hand, silencing him. "No. Don't you dare blame her. You made the choice. You looked me in the eyes and decided I was nothing." His tears flowed harder. I know I was wrong. I'll never forgive myself if you don't give me another chance." For a long moment I studied him. He was broken, yes. But he was also mine. My son. My blood. My greatest love and my deepest wound. And then I realized something chilling. This, right here, was my moment of revenge. Not through cruelty, not through anger, but through power. The power to decide his fate. I let the silence stretch, watching him squirm beneath it. Finally I spoke. "You've come to me now because you have nothing. But I want you to understand something, and I want you to never forget it. You threw me away when I had given you everything. And now you're here because the person you chose over me discarded you just the same." He lowered his head, sobbing quietly. I leaned closer, my voice firm, controlled. "I will decide what happens next. But make no mistake, things will never go back to the way they were. You will never treat me as less than I deserve again." His eyes widened, glistening with hope and fear all at once. He nodded frantically. "His Mom. Anything. I'll do anything." And in that moment, for the first time in decades, I wasn't the powerless mother begging for scraps of love. I was the one in control. I sat across from him in my living room. My son, my betrayer, now reduced to a man trembling like a lost boy. His tears had stained my carpet. His pride lay shattered at my feet. And for the first time in my life I felt no desperation for his love. For 40 years I had lived for him. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every ache in my bones had been for his sake. And when he had grown strong enough to stand on his own, he had pushed me out as though I were nothing. Now 3 days later he sat before me begging. Life has a strange sense of justice. I let the silence linger, making him feel the weight of every cruel word, every dismissive glance, every locked door. He shifted nervously, wiping his swollen eyes, waiting for me to speak. Finally, I rose to my feet, straightening my shoulders. You came here for help. And I will give you something, but not what you expect. His eyes widened with a desperate flicker of hope. Anything, Mom. I'll do better. I promise. I'll change. I shook my head slowly. Promises mean nothing to me now. You made promises once too, do you remember? You told me as a boy that you would always take care of me. And when the time came, you cast me aside. He lowered his head, shame washing over him. I continued, my voice steady, almost cold. I don't need your promises. I don't need your love. What I need is respect. And from this day forward, if you want a place in my life, you will earn it. His lips trembled. How, Mom? I stepped closer, leaning down so my words struck him like iron. You will start by acknowledging every single sacrifice I made for you. You will stop treating me as a burden and start treating me as a woman who carried you, fed you, and gave you everything. And most importantly, you will never again assume that I am powerless without you. I walked to the small wooden box on the table, the one holding my deeds, my bank statements, my proof of strength he had never known existed. I placed my hand on it. You think you lost everything when she left? I said quietly. No. What you lost was me. And I am worth far more than you ever imagined. He stared at the box, confusion mixing with awe. What do you mean? I opened it, showing him a glimpse of the life he never knew I had. Property titles, investment records, wealth built in silence over decades. His mouth fell open. All those years you thought I depended on you, I said, my voice sharp as a blade. But I never needed you. You needed me. And when you threw me away, you threw away the only person who would have stood by you no matter what. His face crumpled as the truth sank in. Tears welled in his eyes again, but this time they weren't just from desperation. They were from shame. Real, burning shame. I closed the box with a snap. I will not give you money. I will not solve your problems. You will rebuild your life on your own the same way I rebuilt mine. Only then will you understand the value of what you lost. He fell to his knees, clutching at my skirt. Mom, please, don't leave me alone. I looked down at him, my son, broken, humbled, stripped of arrogance. A part of me still loved him, would always love him. But love no longer blinded me. You left me alone first, I said softly. Now it's your turn to learn what that feels like. I gently pulled myself free and walked toward the door. He remained on the floor, sobbing, calling after me. I didn't turn back. As I stepped outside into the cool evening air, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Not just freedom from him, but freedom from the chains I had wrapped around myself, believing my worth was tied to his love. I was no longer the mother waiting desperately for scraps of affection. I was no longer the woman cast out and broken. I was a survivor. A builder. A woman of strength and dignity. And as I looked back at my cottage, warm and glowing with the life I had built for myself, I smiled. Because the sweetest revenge wasn't in destroying him. It was in standing tall while he crumbled, proving once and for all that I was never the weak one. I was the strong one. I always had been.